All right, welcome back to ollygolf.com. I'm your host and founder, David Igono. Today we have on the show Pat McGowan, former PGA Tour player and the current Director of Instruction at Pine Needles in Southern Pines, North Carolina. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great this afternoon, David. Thanks for the call.
Now, before we get into the meat of the interview and learning more about you, what's the coolest hole you've played, or scenic, most picturesque hole you've played in the last, well, let's just say 2014?
Well, in 2014, it would probably be the one of the newly restored holes at Mid Pines, one of our golf resorts right across the street from Pine Needles, David. We put in 18 new Bermuda greens. We took out the bent and put in the Bermuda. And several of the holes are, there's only one green we really changed. We restored number 9 at Mid Pines. It became a real flat kind of, had no character in it. We restored it back to a more narrow green with some mounds in the back, and it's a small receiving area for the second shot because it's such a short hole. So it's only a 3-wood wedge shot, so it's a smaller, tighter green. We restored the 2 bunkers. So on the selfish side, it's a pretty cool sight.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, and the cool thing about even just your answer, I've driven through North Carolina. I haven't actually been there, but I don't think it's anything like West Virginia or Maryland or even Ohio. Is it like hilly? Is it green? What's North Carolina like as far as the terrain?
We're in the Sandhills area, and it's not really flat, but you wouldn't consider it rolling hills either. It's just kind of sandy, moundy, a little change of elevation. A lot of the courses out here only have a 30, 40-foot change of elevation, the whole golf course. But again, there are $7 Ross courses in the Pinehurst area, and of course he's notorious for the upside-down bowls, the greens that run away from you if you don't get the ball in the middle of the green, it's going to roll off on the edges. And so there's just enough movement to make it interesting. Covered in pine trees and sand, and that's what we did in the restoration of Mid Pines, David. We restored it back to the look it had in the 30s and 40s. We actually found an aerial photo of 1939 and returned every bunker back to where it was, to the same size. And it's really a fun area to play golf in. That's why Pinehurst number 2 is so notorious and always a top 10 in the world, because of the great terrain of the greens and the slow movement in the greens, and a little bit of change of elevation and some nice mounding with bunkers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's jump into your story. When did you first fall in love with golf?
I was 8.5 years old, David, out in Northern California, just went to Sacramento in a little town called Colusa, California, farming community. We had a 9-hole golf course. That was in 1963 when I was 8.5. It's still a 9-hole golf course. What's that, 42 years later or something like that? And actually, no, 50 years later. And I fell in love. We got invited to a barbecue, went out. I didn't even know what a golf club was because I was almost 9 years old. We were members of the little tennis club there. I had a brother 2 years older, a brother 2 years younger, Mike and Tom. And we were tennis players, and we got invited out. And my 10-year-old brother, who was a great little athlete, he actually won the putting contest. He had never held a golf club, and he beat these kids that had been playing golf for a couple of years. So he was a natural, and then I loved it. And we went out the next day and asked for lessons. And then 2 weeks later, we got hired that summer to pick up the range. And when you pick up 1,000 balls at night, and then you get to go hit a couple baskets, and you get to putt, chip all day, I was instantly passionate about the game.
Awesome. So did you? You said you had two brothers, one older, one younger. What was that like as far as nurturing your love of the game?
Oh, it was great. Actually, I have 3 brothers. At the time, the youngest was he's 7 years young. He was only a year and a half. So it's real difficult names. It goes Mike, Pat, Tom, and Jim. Real original. But all four brothers ended up at one point. All four brothers, or all three brothers, myself, were all scratch golfers, and so there was so much competition just in our family. Whether it was ping pong, David, or tennis, or baseball, or shooting hoops, if I could beat my brothers, I could pretty much play for about any team in the area because they were great athletes.
So, just as far as your amateur career, your amateur, junior golf path, how was that? Was that mainly just competing against your brothers for the most part in the area?
Well, no, it started off that way, but we had a pretty good little junior group at our little 9-hole golf course, Calusa Golf and Country Club. But I was very fortunate, David. Number one, we had our home pro, Warren McCarty. Loved kids, loved junior golf, and he was a real fundamentalist. He made sure that you had a good grip, good posture, good alignment, and that you played naturally. He did whatever your swing was, he'd let you go to a natural swing. So we got good basic fundamentals. And from there, the Northern California Junior Golf Association was the biggest junior golf association in the country, and it still is. I think Northern California actually has even more tournaments than Southern California. And the opportunity to play, when I was 9 years old, David, people say, how many years you played in the tour? I said, well, I started when I was 9 because we played basically 2 tournaments a week for most of the summer. They always had a Monday and a Tuesday event, and then the Wednesday was off, and you'd go down the road, maybe from Sacramento to San Francisco, or from San Francisco to San Jose, or from San Jose to Monterey, from Monterey back up to Salinas. You could play a Monday, Tuesday event and a Thursday, Friday. So we had the opportunity, and our family didn't have a lot of money, but there were enough families in the area that their kids played that we'd take caravans. We'd go in vans, 4 or 5 kids would be in one van with a couple parents, and we'd take turns driving the tournaments, and we had a great experience.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, how did you played collegiately at BYU, correct?
Right, correct.
How did you come across? Not come across. How did you choose BYU, and what was that like as far as a transition, competition-wise? I mean, you obviously grew up in a very cultured and junior golf and nurturing environment. How was it like transitioning to college?
Well, it was it was a pretty natural transition because, like I said, the tournament schedule in the Northern California Golf Association, Junior Association, was so extensive and so competitive that Coach Carl Tucker, the coach for 27 years at BYU, always recruited out of Northern California. He would always try to take the top recruit. We had a point system. Wins in different events got so many points, and then the majors like the match play championship and some of the major junior events made more points. But Coach always tried to get one of the top NorCal guys. He didn't recruit much out of Southern California. Most of those kids went to UCLA or USC or Stanford or something like that. But he got a lot of the NorCal guys, and he recruited a lot out of Washington and Oregon. But back to what got me to BYU was I was a good enough junior player that I had several opportunities, and one of them was Stanford. And Bud Finger, the coach at Stanford, wanted me to go there. But my older brother, I told you he was a good player. He got a full ride to Stanford in 1972. He was 2 years older. So he's playing golf at Stanford when I get recruited by Stanford and by BYU. And Coach Tucker had recruited my older brother Mike 2 years earlier because he was one of the top juniors in Northern California. He was either first or second in points. So Mike elected to go to Stanford when it came my turn, and Mike wasn't all that happy playing golf there. And I thought, I want to get out of California. So Coach Tucker offered me a scholarship, and I went to BYU and had a tremendous experience. Great people there. It was an adjustment getting used. I didn't even know what a Mormon was or what a Latter-day Saint was, but I learned real quick, and I got along great. And even though I didn't ever join the Mormon church, it was a great experience.
Now that's adaptation at its finest, to say the least. I mean, anybody who's been to Utah, especially Provo or Salt Lake City, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a very LDS Mormon centric place. But let's focus a little bit more on just that adaptation. I mean, you just said you grew up playing 2 tournaments a week during the summer. I mean, I don't want to do the math, but that's a lot of golf as a younger kid.
A lot of golf. And, it wasn't every week, but there were several weeks. I mean, the summer might only be 11 or 12 weeks long, and I might play in 16, 18 events, so it's more than one a week. So there's it was a lot of golf at a young age, 10, 11. And I was fortunate to have parents that would, they couldn't afford to send me everywhere, but I'd get in with other families and other groups and jump in other vans, and we would, sleep six in a room and eat at McDonald's, but we would play the tournaments. It was a great, great opportunity.
Now, how did that, going into college is completely different. And one of the things that I'm learning myself, just about college golf, I know that we're talking about, 20 plus years ago, in college golf, or honestly any college sport, was a different environment and climate than it is now. As far as, nowadays, you play any college sport, you might as well, you're almost a pro as far as the exposure and the expectation and what have you. How did that foundation of playing golf and being competitive and bringing it, how did that transfer for you on the course, adapting to college, adapting to going on different trips and tournaments across the West Coast, across the country, in college at BYU?
Right. Well, that was invaluable having that experience because, like I said, Northern and Southern California, the whole state of California, if you took the top 10 juniors there, they could probably beat any other state because it was so competitive. We had so many hundreds of junior golfers at the time. This is back in the early 70s. This is a long time ago. This is, over 40 years ago. So that opportunity was invaluable. And when I went to BYU, it's kind of ironic that I might have been one of the top dogs in the Northern California junior golf, but when I got to BYU, I had a hard time making the starting 6. That's how good a team we had. And looking back, the experience of junior golf and how competitive it was, and how passionate I was, and how much I loved the competition, that really made me, allowed me to make the team, because I played on a team that had a bunch of All-Americans. And if you can believe this, the 6 of us that played my junior and senior year, the last 2 years, the 6 of us that were playing together, all 6 made it on the PGA Tour. That's how competitive it was.
Yeah, I remember, I believe it was even last week, I spoke with John Fote, who was one of your teammates at BYU, and he said the exact thing, and that blows my mind. It truly, that's crazy. John, who won the U.S. Amateur, won back-to-back tour events his rookie year, and he had a very successful career. His freshman and sophomore year, he wasn't playing every week. He was, he was his junior and senior, but he had to work hard to stay on the team. He played most of the events, and I was the same way. Mike Reed, who has won multiple tournaments on the regular tour, and he won a couple on the Champions Tour, and Mike Brannon, who was the best junior in the world in the early 70s, and John Fote, multiple winner, and Jim Nelford, the Canadian, he played the tour for about 12 years until he had an injury, and James Blair was the top junior out of Utah, and he played on the PGA Tour and has won a lot of state opens and a real good player. We had a team that, just like I talked about beating my brothers, if I beat the guys on my team, I was probably winning the golf tournament. That's how good they were. Yeah, I'm thinking now, I come from a team sport. I come from a football background. And the competition at a position group, or say offense versus defense, is well documented, and it's mano a mano, going head to head, trying to be better than the next guy. Golf is a little bit. I'm trying to think of the word to use. Golf is a little bit more refined than that, but it's all the more. There's no excuses. There's no luck. There's not really chance. You just have to grind it out and be better categorically each step of the way. than your opponent, than your competitor. So I'm trying to think in my mind, college. I mean, I played in junior college, and I went to a D1 school, a pretty decent, D1 school, football-wise, and there was a transition as far as in junior college, it was like, oh, cool, I just have to keep working every day, and one day I'll go to a bigger school. Once I got to that bigger school, it was like, holy cow. It's not even about working hard anymore. It's about preparation. It's about the small little details. Every small little detail. It's about film. It's about knowing where you're supposed to be. It's about knowing your responsibility. So I'm thinking of you and your squad at BYU, and it's like, I mean, that must have been so awesome. I mean, in the moment, but especially when you guys got on tour, because you've been on tour. I mean, you've been.
Oh yeah. We did. By the time we got on tour, David, you're right. We were pretty well seasoned and very competitive, and it's even gotten bigger now. I mean, the Jordan Spieth and these younger kids are coming out in their early 20s and being competitive. When we came out on the tour in our early 20s, it took us 4 or 5 years to learn what we were doing on the tour. Now the learning curve, they played even more junior and more college and more amateur events. They played twice as many as we played, which is hard to believe, So it has even changed, but back then we had great opportunities. And back to the fact that we had such competitive guys on the team, the real tough thing about college golf is golf's an individual sport, yet we're playing as a team. So there's no teammate that's going to block for you or throw you a pass or you have your own game, but then you're just 1/6 of that team, and you post a score and you add up those scores. And the great thing about it, there's no ambiguity. Like you said, it's you make a bunch of 3s and 4s, and you're going to help the team out a lot. So it's posting a score. And then even amongst our team members, as good as we got along, we were all so competitive. We wanted to beat each other. And back home, our starting 6 was pretty solid for a couple of years. But my first 2 years on the team, there were 4 or 5 other guys back at the camp that were just waiting for you to come back because you're going to be back in the qualifying. You had to keep beating those guys to stay on the team. So that inner competition just made us tougher and tougher.
And yeah, I mean I'm kind of a preparation and over preparation, over working on the details, and just
right.
I am a nut for figuring out the process. And to me, that's so awesome. That's so awesome. So, obviously BYU is a very formative experience for you. Let's talk about the next transitioning to the PGA Tour. And, for some of us who are younger and don't understand how much the game of golf has really changed, I mean, I don't know if it's even really been 15 years, but I would say the game of golf has completely changed as far as the PGA Tour, its exposure, and the process of becoming, I'm going to use the term, vested on tour. Explain to us that transition that you had or some of your teammates had from going to college, being very good in college, but then being a completely different pool or environment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, my senior year was 1977, and so I finished up in the spring of '77 at BYU. I still had another semester to graduate. It's pretty tough to graduate in 4 years when you're traveling playing golf. So I was registered and ready to go back in the fall and played real well that summer, the summer of 1977. And my dad in August said, "Hey, why don't you can go back and get your degree anytime. So why don't you enter tour school? You're playing pretty well, And I wasn't really one of the better players better amateurs, but I was a second team All-American my senior year. They only have 8 first team All-Americans. So I had a good senior year, won some tournaments, and then played well that summer, played well in the U.S. Amateur. The one that John Fote, my teammate, won at Aronimink outside of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And Dad said, what the heck, we'll get a couple, let's round up some sponsors, raise a few $1,000, we'll send you back to Pinehurst and see what happens. Well, fast forward, that was in August. The finals in 1977 were in November at Pinehurst number 4 golf course. just by coincidence, a friend of mine knew the Bell family, and he called me up and said, "Hey, where are you staying when we go back for tour school?" I said, "I don't know, Motel 6. I mean, back in the 70s, where else would you stay when you're a 23-year-old who doesn't have any money?" He said, "I know a family owns a golf resort called Pine Hills. I think I can get us a freebie." And, of course, I said, "Well, if it's free, it's for me." At the time, the young pro's motto is, "If it's free, I'll take 3."
Yeah.
But, so we stayed 10 days and ate our meals, and both happened to find lightning in the bottle. Both of us. Bruce Robertson was his name. He was 25 at the time. He went to Stanford with my brother, playing the golf team there. And we both got our cards, and when we checked out, the bill was $22. And my father-in-law was so great that he said, "I'll pay for your room and I'll pay for your meals, but I'm not paying for that beer party you had when you guys both qualified."
Yeah.
But so fortunate enough to get through tour school, but coming out, that was the time of Monday qualifying. So both Bruce and I and the other 28 players that got through that tour school at Pinehurst number 4 had to Monday qualify. So when we got started off, David, it was basically 3 tournaments within the tournament. You had to Monday qualify just to get in the event. Then you had to play well on Thursday and Friday and make the cut. And then in your young 20s back then, guys weren't winning when they were first on the tour. So then you had to figure out how to play well on the weekend to make a nice check. So it was basically 3 tournaments within the week.
Wow. So
pretty difficult. That's what they call the old Monday morning rabbits. I mean, it was there was no exempt tour back then.
So what did that do to, as far as your perspective? What were some of the things that you knew you had to iron out?
You know what it did? Absolutely. You know what it did, David? It made you tough. It made you're always having to prove, every day you had to prove yourself. You had to Monday qualify. You had to try to make the cut. Now, back then, if you made the cut, you were exempt into the next tournament because you wouldn't have time to finish on Sunday and get to the next venue and Monday qualify. So there was a lot of incentive on making the cuts. So the pressure was always on, and that's what weeded people out. I mean, back then, there were 2 qualifying a year, spring and the fall, 25 spots. So the 50 guys that played for the year, it was probably only about, each year maybe 15 or 18 would keep their cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the years went on, very few guys would stay out there more than 5 years. There was a pretty good turnover. Now it's a lot better because of the web.coms and the full year of playing really big events. 30 events a year prepares you for the tour, so it's a different preparation. Back then, it was the guys in their 20s weren't really thinking about winning. They're thinking more about surviving, learning how to play the game with the big boys, gaining experience, and then getting, after 4 or 5 years on your belt, you were kind of prepared to go to the next level. But it was a stepping stone back then.
So what, you're saying it made you tough. What mentors and influences did you lean on, did you look for? Because any athlete in any sport on any, well, let me not say any level, but the higher-end athletes tend to use their off-season or their time not in a direct game or tournament or season to improve themselves. What are some of the methods or the mentors that you sought out to improve your game?
I was always a big positive thinker, and that was in the 70s. That's when the power of positive thinking, and there was a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, written in the 60s, actually, and that was at the start of all the positive thinking books. So I was a real student of that, a lot of visualization. I talked to some of the better players about what they think about. I can remember asking Don January, the old pro from outside of Houston, Texas area. He was always so cool, and I asked him how he, kept us cool all the time, and he said he had a little steam valve up in his left ear, and when he got hot, he'd reach up there and kind of fake like he's opened up the steam valve. He said, let all that poison out. Just great little things like that people never hear about, but the tour pros all struggle with that, with the anger issues and the emotional issues and the frustration and the patient issues. So I knew that physically, I was not the best player. I was never long off the tee, and my forte was a good attitude and good short game. So those are the things I really worked on. And we started in college studying the mind game and how to stay positive. And I hung around positive people. I wasn't one of those, somebody started talking negative, I just turned it off. So, it was kind of the forefront of the sports psychologist. But, yeah, you have to hang around people that are successful in any walk of life. The books about the 7 essential successful things of successful people, stuff like that. There's a lot to that, especially in golf.
So, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's a perfect segue into my next question. So, you're on tour, you're fighting for your golf life, week in, week out, day in, day out, tournament to tournament. What were some of your setbacks or challenges or even low points where obviously it was a learning experience, but you came out of it better?
Well, one really stands out, and it was in I believe it was in 1989, and I was struggling to keep my card. It was the first 5 years I played, 78 through 82, I think it was. 78, 79, 80, 82 was money qualifying. The all-exempt tour, when you went to 125, started, I believe, at the end of the 82 season. So all of a sudden, top 60 always got their cards for the year. They didn't have to money qualify. But it was pretty tough. Like I said, guys coming out of college, very few of them were making the top 60. So when I went to the top 125 now, I was pretty consistent from 82 to 89, or 82 to 88, that little 6-year period. I was in the top 125 every year. And that made it a lot easier because now you're fully exempt into you're in 40 events before the year starts. But the one that really stands out is, I think it was 89, I was struggling toward the end of the year. It was either late August or early September, and there was a tournament in Chattanooga. And I needed a good finish at the end of the year really important to stay in the top 125 because I hadn't been playing that well. And to speed the story up, I eagled 17 the last day. It was a par 5. I hit a 3-wood about 10 feet, made the eagle putt, charged over to the 18th tee, little dog leg right. It was like 3-wood off the tee, 7-iron in, and I was tied for the lead with 1 hole to go. And now I'm thinking about winning. I'd never won. I'd had 3 seconds. I'd never won on the tour. But I'm thinking about winning. I'm tied for the lead, and the leaders were behind me about 3 holes. I was having a real good round, and I was going to finish in front of them. And I hit my tee ball on down the right side of the tree line. I tried to hit a little knockdown shot around the trees. It hit a branch, and the ball went out of bounds, and I made a triple bogey. And so I went from tied for first. I think I ended up finishing like 15th. And it was like it was the highest high I can hardly ever remember, and then the lowest low walking off with a 7, and really didn't hit a bad shot. I hit a pretty conservative punch shot that was going to go up in the front of the green and hit the one middle branch, the last tree, and kicked it right out of bounds. So that's the kind of stuff. So from the 1st of September until the end of October, the next 2 months, I couldn't get that shot out of my mind. But the good news is, I ended up 125th. I got the last spot that year. Mm-hmm. So as big a catastrophe and as tough as that was, making that triple bogey and having to swallow that, it ended up fine. I had another year exemption, but that could have easily knocked me out, of being exempt. So those are the kind of things that, it doesn't always come down to one shot, but that was a fateful day. But I kept a good attitude and worked hard, and actually had another good tournament between that and the end of the year, which got me to 125. So sometimes those are the kind of things that knock guys out, and you read about those stories of guys that don't get their card, that have tried 10 tour schools, and they 3-putt the last hole from 10 feet, and did all those horror stories. But it's just a tough game, and you have to keep your cool and keep positive.
Yeah, no doubt. That's it's funny how it doesn't matter how well prepared or even over prepared you are. the ball's going to bounce or come off of your club in a way that you're going to have to react to and that you're going to have to adjust to. And that adjustment, it starts in your mind or your eyes. It starts in how you see the situation, how you see the challenge. And it's being in a place where I'm far enough removed from my playing career and talking to other golfers and other people who play other sports. The coolest thing is that to a T, most of them always say, I wish I would have had the perspective that I had at the end of my career, at the beginning of my career. Is that the same for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that's ever played the game for any period of time that doesn't look back and say, if I would have just if I would have controlled my highs and my lows. See, getting too high is just as dangerous as getting too low. People that go along and let's say it's somebody's never broken 100 for the first time, and they come in 18 and they're really playing well, and they're afraid to add it up, and somebody says, "Hey, David, if you just make a 5 on this hole, you break 100 for the first time." All of a sudden, all the pressure comes on your shoulders, and we all try too hard. And in golf, you almost have to get out of your own way and just play and let your natural subconscious take over and just make the swing. When we start doing things, when things go wrong, we miss a couple putts, then we start second-guessing ourselves. It's a very difficult thing. And, the one thing I tell all junior golfers and even my own kids, I said, it's every shot you have the opportunity to react or not react. And the more you don't react to the outcome because it's already gone, the better off you're going to play. You don't have to emotionally get too high either. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting excited, but if you get too excited, that'll hurt your performance. So the main thing, and what I always say is the most important shot in golf is the next one. Because the one you hit is gone and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll save that question or comment. So, yeah, I mean that's the essence of longevity and success or a career. It's having the perspective to know that the shot that you just made or missed is not going to make or break you. So let's transitioning from PGA Tour to the Champions Tour. What was that like? Because the Championship Tour or the Champions Tour, excuse me, it's a little different ball game, a little different frequency, all the above. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was a great experience because my last year in the PGA Tour was 1993. So I played 1978 through 1993. And then I started teaching in our golf schools here at Pine Needles. Basically, I kind of fiddled around for a year and worked in a putter company and different things. I started teaching in 1994, and then taught solid until 2004. So taught for or probably about 2003, taught 9 years, and then I said, if I'm going to try to play the Champions Tour, my game, it's been kind of sitting in the closet for 9 years. So I need to get back out and be competitive because you just don't turn 50 and all of a sudden start beating the guys that beat you when you're 20 and they beat you when you're 30. They beat you when you're 40 and they're probably going to beat you when you're 50 if you're not in better shape. So I played there's a senior tour called the Sun Belt Tour. You only have to be 47 or older. And I played about a year and a half on that tour, probably played 15 events to kind of get ready. And it was very rewarding in 2004. It was the finals of the tour school, Champions Tour. We're at the King and the Bear down in St. Augustine, Florida. And it was a 6-round event, shot 19 under for 6 rounds, and tied for the 7th spot. And there are only 7 cards. And in a 3-hole playoff, I got that 7th spot. So that was, to me, that was as rewarding as even getting my tour card back in 1977. The fact of not playing competitively from 93 until 2004, other than a handful of mini tour events, and then getting one of those 7 spots. So I was actually fully exempt for the 2005 season. Played 5 events, and my back went south. I hurt my back, and it took me from March of 2005 until July of 2005 to figure out that it was a piece of the L5 disc had chipped off and gotten on a nerve, so I had to have back surgery in August. And so only played 5 events in '05, and then instead of playing 25 events or 23 events, the next year they gave me 12 events to finish off on a medical, and I didn't play that well, so I basically only played 2005 and 2006.
So, and I don't want to overuse the term full circle as far as competitively playing on a tour, if you will. But we started off the conversation talking about how, junior golf in Northern California. I mean, you're in it all year round, but especially during the summer, just going after it. Then we walk through college, and then we get to the PGA Tour, and then you take a somewhat of a hiatus from competing regularly, and then you do the Sun Belt Tour and the Champions Tour. That cycle is somewhat complete. Looking back on it, how is that just that thirst and that ability to compete, even if it's golf related? How has that completely affected you, or has it? What are some of the things that you take away from that you share with your kids or junior golfers or your students that you teach the game to?
Well, I think the game is so great because number one, it's the passion to play the game well, the competition, the camaraderie, but also the game of golf teaches you respect and responsibility and patience, all those things. Another sport, you could run faster, jump higher, try harder, pump more iron. You could, like I said, feel like you have somewhat control, even though it's a team sport, on getting better yourself. Like you said, getting in the process, being in perfect shape, being perfectly prepared. You can be perfectly prepared in golf and have a weird balance. I mean, look at Tiger hit the flagstick 2 years ago at Augusta and went in the water. That's why the game is so great, because those perspectives of having to be patient and having to have a great attitude and having respect for the game, those are qualities you want in all walks of life. So I was fortunate that my outdoor job was the same thing as I would want people to learn in any business, and I teach my kids about all these great qualities of a human being, showing respect, having the responsibility, having the patience and the mental toughness to be able to accept strange things happening, and the humility to realize that when you play great, it could change the next day. And I think that's why most golfers are pretty level-headed, because of the humility and knowing that you never really have it. You borrow it once in a while, even the best in the world. You think about the best players in the world, David. What's a great year on tour? 3 wins. And if they play 30 events a week, they only borrowed it 10% of the time. 90% of the time, they're not playing to the best of their ability. So once you realize that, it's a very humbling experience.
Yeah, I spoke with Jonathan Hodge, played golf at Tennessee Chattanooga, and he made the exact same comment. And it blew my mind, because in our culture, well, in any sports culture, you always want to focus on the winners, the champions, the gladiators who win the most, who play the most, who fight to the end, and who have a long, glorious career. And he was like, David, he goes, you look at Tiger, you look at Phil, their per winning percentages are worse than the average batting average in the major.
There you go.
And it's crazy how much you have to manage not being your best. You can't judge yourself on not winning the tournament, because you do that, then you have to judge yourself on if you do win the tournament. And there's so many factors at play that it's not that linear at all. So that, I mean, that's a great.
That's a great point. And especially golfers managing their egos. You know, it's a tough pill to swallow when you see the best in the world. They'll hit in the water, make a double bogey in the last hole. They'll fill double in the last hole and not win in the U.S. Open. I mean, those things carry. Look at Palmer, never won a PGA championship in his life. He won 3 of the 4 Grand Slams. Those things carry. That's a bitter pill to swallow the rest of your life, but it makes you a better character, makes you a better person. And those are the things that you try to pass along to the kid. Is, you know, it doesn't matter. Our son who played, he was the number 1 man at Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill for a couple of years. And I say, you know, son, I really don't. It doesn't really matter to me what you shoot. It matters to me how you handle yourself walking up the golf course. You know, you might have a 75 one day and I'll be more proud of you than shooting 67 the day before. You know, it's all about once the ball is struck and once the last number is posted, it's over. And all of us carry it too far. You know, it used to take me a little while that if I bogeyed the last hole, I was a little sour for a couple hours. You know, and but it's just all part of the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how simple it is to say, but it's a whole other game to actually believe and act out.
It's not. It's never. You know, somebody says, "Well, what a great job." You know, be careful what you wish for because tour life is. It looks great and it can be great, but you know, there's a lot of downtime and a lot of packing suitcases on Friday afternoon when you just missed a cut by a shot. But it was a great experience. The one thing I want to just go back on briefly is, and this is for any listeners that have kids that are specifically just golf, or at what point do they not play the other sports? When I said I was on tour since I was 9, we play a lot of junior terms, but all 3 brothers and myself, all 4 of us, David, played basketball and football all through high school. And we all started, and we were all on decent teams. And in football, we played both offense. We played both ways. And football was a big part of my high school life. I remember the football more than the golf. The golf was just kind of a sidelight compared to football. Was huge at our school in Northern California. So I always tell parents, let those play the other sports. You learn a lot from the team sports. You learn a lot about character, and it's very important. There's plenty of time for golf. So we literally didn't play. We didn't play much golf between the end of August and then we pick it up again in like March. So that made us even more determined, David, and even more passionate, even more enthusiastic to get out there and practice because we felt we were behind the 8 ball compared to other kids that were playing year round.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's actually a very seamless segue into what you're doing now, and just in junior golf in general. What are some of the things that you do as far as director of instruction at Pine Needles with junior golf?
We have a bunch of ladies golf schools, and then we have what we call the golf academies, which are men and women. And our 2 main youth golf REs, specifically with the juniors, to answer your question, the first week in July and the second week in July, we have 2 back-to-back 6-day golf schools. And in the past, we usually have about 70 kids in one of the schools and 50 in the other. So 120 to 140 junior golfers in that 2-week period. And we talk a lot about the things that you and I have talked about the character. And you know, the first thing we do on day 1 is we talk about the safety and the respect of the game and how to keep the golf course in better shape than you found it, and, you know, being safe when you're hitting balls and not fooling around. And we have half-day instruction in those schools, and then they go out and play. But it's more than just specifically, we're not having them hit balls all day. In the afternoons, they'll play 9 or 18. But then we do ping pong tournaments, and they play shuffleboard, and we have swimming contests, and we have relays at night. We make it fun. So we want these kids, and that's what the golf RE is all about. We have ladies, we have adults, and we have youth golf REs. And these youth golf camps are about learning the basic fundamentals of the game. We want them to become passionate and to love the game of golf. But more importantly, that love and passion, we want to turn into respect and responsibility. basically the 9 core values that the First Tee talks about. And I'm on the First Tee board of directors here, and we have a great chapter, First Tee of the Sandhill. And it makes my day, and I feel like it's my job for these kids to leave loving the game, but loving what the game means, and the fact that you can play it your whole life. You're going to meet some great people on the golf course. You're going to use it through whatever walk of life, whatever business you're in, and by being behaving well on the golf course and showing good character, that just makes you a better person in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And that's, dealing with junior golf, it always makes me think when you're dealing with juniors, you're really dealing with their parents as well.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to absolutely. You're dealing with your parents.
How do you temper perspectives and expectations as you're nurturing these young golfers?
Well, all parents, and God bless them. I'm a parent, and I'm watching our kids play, and most parents think their kid's going to be the next Tiger Woods or the next Paula Creamer or Annika Sorenstam, and there's only one of them. But the best way in my job, and I talk to a lot of parents. I pull them to the side, and I've got a handful of juniors I'm teaching now. They're in that 13 to 17-year-old range, and which is a real critical time to enjoy the game more, learn good practice habits, but play it for the right reason. And a lot of kids, if they don't live up to their expectations, or especially their parents' expectations, they feel like they're failures. I want every kid, and my kids all know that they're champions no matter what they shoot. They're champions by their actions and how they behave, and by their character on the golf course. You win every day when you walk off the golf course. You leave it in better shape. You smile, shake somebody's hand, and if I tell everyone, all I want is I want them to try their best on every shot, and score is insignificant if you try your best. You will play better overall if you keep that good attitude. But specifically back to the parents, the great Jackie Burke, I'm sure you know that name. He's been the head guy at the Champions Golf Club outside of Houston, Texas for years. And Jackie Burke, I think, said it best. I read a quote a long time ago. Actually, a friend of mine pointed out. He said the best way to avoid messing with good talent is to be there more and say less. And that really applies, David, to the parents. Just being there supporting, but not being critical. You don't need to talk about every shot or every strategy. Be there more and say less. And just think how much better the soccer moms and the baseball dads and all the parents that sit up the stands yelling at their kids, what if they're just there smiling and saying less? That's a powerful, powerful thing to do for your kid.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe that's another conversation for another time. But I follow a lot of soccer, European soccer, and one of the more renowned youth coaches or youth developers of talent said, it's like, how do you make one youth talent develop faster than another youth talent? And he was like, simple. You put them with another youth talent. And what that means to me, especially, in our society and our culture, as a parent or a coach, sometimes the best thing that you can do is just let them play more. Let them play more and say less, because the one thing that you don't ever want to force on anybody, especially any athlete at any age, you don't want to force upon them a love of your expectation of their game. If you do that, it's only a matter of time before the burnout sets in, and it's a very crippling or defeating sense of, I don't know why I'm even playing anymore, because I'm not playing for myself, and that manifests itself in very, very insidious ways.
Absolutely. And what's the best way to learn? See, every parent we want, and especially in golf, you want your kid not to make the mistakes you made playing the game. Guess what? The only way you learn is by making those mistakes. How do you learn to be a good hitter unless you strike out and strike out a few times, or swinging at bad pitches, or whatever your habits are? You know, how do you become a better putter if you don't tree putt once in a while? And so, you know, in the parents' haste and in our passion to not have our kids make the same mistakes we make, especially in golf, they're going to make them. The only way you learn is by making those mistakes. And you know what? We all hit crazy balls out of bounds, and we leave a ball in the bunker, or we really want to make that 6-footer for par. We want to run it 3 feet past, and we miss it coming back. Everybody does that. So it's how you react to it. And, you know, everybody has a different learning curve, but we can't stop people from making the mistakes they're going to make. That's how they learn.
Exactly. Now, my last question for you is sort of a loaded question, but I think it's still a great question nonetheless.
Okay.
Who, and I'm not asking you to narrow it down, you know, because there's only 2, but what 2 mentors have you had, whether just in life in general or in the game of golf, that have significantly improved, whether it's your outlook or your game or all the above?
Well, I think it's there are a lot of them in my life, but looking back, and I mentioned earlier, Warren McCarty. You know, when I was 9 years old, that's a pretty impressionable age, and the golf pro was a pretty cool dude. You know, when he can do things with the golf club that he couldn't do, and he was a good player, and just his interest in all of us, and the time he spent with me, and the stories he told me, and I got to grow up caddying for him in tournaments. You know. And he's a pretty good player. I mean, I remember in the sectional events, he'd go out, shoot 70, 71, and that was like my hero, you know. So I got the good basic fundamentals at a young age, and that was really that's the first mentor and a very important one. And then you know, looking back, I'd have to say my dad was very influential. And my dad was not. He didn't play golf that much. He played a few years and got down to a 10 handicap, and then he kind of gave up the game. He was busy working. But I think my dad's, he was a real mentor to me, because he was a little on the tough side, and you know, he did things that would challenge me. At the time, I didn't know it was doing me good, but looking back, he did me a lot of good. He didn't say a lot, but he made it very clear that if I wanted to be good, I had to do certain things. And he wasn't there working on my swing, but he was more of a, let's talk about what went right and how are you going to improve. And I remember for a while, there's a couple guys in town that were, you know, that wanted me to go out partying and stuff. He said, son, I'm just going to tell you a little story. He said, those guys that want you to be with them, they're going to be here 5 years from now. He says, you have a chance to make something of your life. You can go out there and play that great game. Those are the kind of things that really stick to you. And looking back, my dad's been gone. He died 20 years ago. But looking back, those things really, they really pushed me. You know, at the time, some of those statements might have been a little rough, but he was a great mentor in his way without really knowing that he was mentoring. Maybe he did.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always awesome to hear any man, especially a young man, have a father figure who pushes them in a way that really only fathers can, and that's always awesome to hear.
And, you know, the compliment to that, too, is I find myself mentoring in the same way to our son. You know, I really believe in saying less and being there more. And, you know, instead of, especially being a player myself, it's quick for me to criticize. I've had to bite my tongue many, many times. But I remember how Dad handled it, and I thought it was a pretty good way. And just a little sidebar, Coach Carl Tucker was great, our golf coach. I mean, he had to figure out how to control a lot of talent, but 6 big egos too, and he did a great job. You know, on a golf team like that, some guys need to be pushed. Some guys you just don't need to say anything. Some guys need work on their swing. It's kind of like raising 6 kids. You're going to have 6 different personalities. You got to treat them a little bit different, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can just imagine the pushing and the pulling and the prodding and the avoiding.
Oh my God!
And
then occasionally you get guys fighting on the team. I mean, we're all human, but Warren McCarty got me going to my dad, and then of course Carl Tucker was a big part too. You know, I'm lucky to have Peggy Kirkbell, my mother-in-law, was a famous player. She was always encouraging, and she had more wisdom in her little finger than I ever had my whole body.
So, well, and let's talk about Peggy Kirkbell a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that she helped you with, helped you to navigate through?
She was, I've lived here since 1981. Bonnie and I got married in 1981, coming up on 33 years. So she's always been she's such a good fundamentalist. You know, when she watched me hit balls or she'd watch me putter, it was always about just timing and about balance. That was just real. She knew she wasn't going to fiddle with my swing much, but she always talked about the rhythm of the swing and staying in balance. And she, you know, that helped me a lot. I mean, she's just so great and she's mentored thousands over the years. And it's pretty cool that I remember when she was 60 years old, when I was in my late 20s, and she hit the ball almost as far off the tee as I did when she was 60. How about that? She's 92 now. What a golf swing. So that was, she got my attention when she'd go out and shoot in the mid-70s when she's 60 years old. Hey, 60 is not very old anymore because I'm 60 this November.
No kidding. No kidding. Well, Pat, I mean, I've had fun. This has been a great conversation.
It's been a great hour. Thank you so much. It's flown by, David. Flown by.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just want to thank you for coming on to the show, and we're definitely going to have to do another interview here shortly. But I just want to thank you for coming on to the show.
Thanks a lot, David. Great talking to you.